Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Guys of Magic. This is Hunter coming at you with another video. That's right, solo this time, but bringing you something very special. That's right, we're going to be doing an EDH deck tech. I have built a deck around the wonderful Roxanne. If you guys don't know already, this is one of my favorite legendary creatures that came out with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And of course, I went and had this built on my own. But I'm going to give you a bit of a budget build here. So we're sticking in the range of $300 to $400 if you want to go out and get this deck. It's exciting. I'm very excited for this card. This one definitely shined to me as soon as I saw it. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so you're not missing out on any of this cool content that we're always coming out with. But in case you guys didn't already know what Roxanne Starfall Savant does, let me just go ahead and tell you. She is 3, a red and a green for a 4/3 legendary creature cat druid. It says whenever Roxanne Starfall Savant enters the battlefield or attacks, create a tapped colorless artifact token named Meteorite with, when Meteorite enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. And you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. The other cool ability Roxanne has is that whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, add 1 mana of any type that artifact token produced. You might be thinking, well, that's cool. Your meteor is going to be tapping for 2 if Roxanne's on the field. That's absolutely correct. But there are different kind of tokens in Magic that also produce mana. You guys ever heard of treasures? That's right. All your treasures are going to be tapping for 2 mana with Roxanne on the field. It is fantastic. I love this card so much. It's Gruul, so of course mana is going to be a thing. We're going to have a lot of mana flying around. We're going to be casting a whole bunch of things with all of our mana. We're going to be ramping. We're going to be doing crazy things. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about this deck in different groups, and our first group is creatures. Not only just creatures, these first couple of cards we're going to talk about are mana dorks. That's right, I told you we were going to be ramping and doing shenanigans. Let's get some of these dorks in the game. Birds of Paradise, in case you didn't know, is a green for a 0/1 creature bird with flying. You tap to add 1 mana of any color. Delighted Halfling, 1 green mana for a 1/2 creature halfling citizen. You can tap to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. And Goblin Archaeomancer is a red and a green for a 2/2 creature goblin shaman. Each spell you cast that's red or green costs 1 less to cast. So these 3 cards are fantastic in getting things cheaper, especially that Delighted Halfling, because we know our commander is going to be a problem at the board. Why not tap the Delighted Halfling to get our commander uncounterable? That's right, bring out the weapon faster. And the last 2 dorks have the exact same text. That's right, it's Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves. Both cost 1 green mana. They are both a 1/1. They're both an Elf Druid, and they both tap for a green. These are in pretty much every green deck. Throw them in here too. Get the mana flowing. Let's go. Now I did mention not only do the Meteorites tap for mana, but Treasure also taps for 2 mana. So let's get some Treasure Makers and another pretty cool one that makes mana. Goldspan Dragon, really important in the deck. It's 3 and 2 red for a 4/4 creature dragon. It's got flying. It's got haste. And it says whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. And treasures you control have tap. Sacrifice this. Add 2 mana of any 1 color. Whoa, look at the synergies here. We can also have treasures now tap for 3 if we have both Goldspan and our commander out on the field. Professional Facebreaker is 2 and a red for a 2/3 creature human warrior. It's got menace, and it says whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And it has a sacrifice treasure. Exile top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Once again, treasure production is important here. Professional Facebreaker hits that clause. And it gives that cool ability where we can sack those treasures if we didn't have anything to do with them to go ahead and get some card advantage. Another really cool treasure maker here is Tireless Provisioner. That's right, it's 2 and a green for a 3/2 creature elf scout. It's got landfall that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token or a treasure token. Guess what we're probably going to be making? Treasures. And another mana producer here that we don't normally see in any deck. It's got a home here. It's Savala Ice Shaper. It's 1 a red and a green for a 2/4 legendary snow creature troll warrior. It's got an ability we can pay 3, tap it, create a colorless snow artifact token named Icy Manalith with tap, add 1 mana of any color. As another ability, you can pay 6 in a red and a green to tap it. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That first ability is fantastic for this deck because if Roxanne's on the field, we could be making these icy manaliths. Now they're going to be tapping for 2 because they're token artifacts. Isn't that cool? Moving on to some card advantage creatures, because card advantage is one of the most important, if not the most important thing in the entire game of Magic. You want to get your cards quicker. Beat your opponent to death. So, Beast Whisperer, 2 and 2 green for a 2/3 creature elf druid. It says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. We have enough creatures in here to continue to do that over and over. Sarenth Steel Seeker is 1 and a green for a 1/2 creature human artificer scout. It says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may reveal it, put it in your hand. If you don't put the card in your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So Sarenth Steel Seeker is going to be triggering pretty often, especially when our commander's attacking and creating meteorites that count as artifacts that enter the battlefield, and we can go ahead and just get card advantage off of those meteorites as well. It's fantastic. Toski, Bearer of Secrets, is a must include in any deck that runs green. It's 3 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature squirrel. It says this spell can't be countered, and it's got indestructible. It also says it attacks each combat if able, and it says whenever a creature you control deals damage to a player, you draw a card. So how many creatures deal combat damage, we draw that many cards. Toski is also indestructible, so it's really hard to get rid of. I love Toski. Moving on to some creatures that do a bit of utility for us. This first one, Kogla and Yadaro. That's right, we got some mana to work with. Might as well put it into them. It's 2 red and 2 green for a 7/7 legendary creature ape dinosaur turtle. It says when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. You can either have it gain trample and haste until end of turn, or you can have it fight a creature you don't control. It also has a very cool ability that says pay 2, a red and a green, discard Kogla and Yadaro, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, shuffle Kogla and Yadaro into your library from your graveyard, then draw a card. So not only, if we just have it in our hand, we can just pay that 4, destroy something that's really pesky on our opponent, like a Smothering Tithe or one of their rocks. It goes right back into our deck, and then we get to draw a card. So, like I said, utility, fantastic. Eternal Witness, 1 and 2 green for a 2/1 creature human shaman. It says when it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. If did our opponent kill one of our favorite things, put it back in the hand. These next 2 creatures really help our commander out. The first up is Roaming Throne, 4 generic mana for a 4/4 artifact creature golem. It's got ward 2. It also says as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Probably choosing cat. It is the chosen type in addition to its other types, and if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So if our commander's not on the field yet, it enters, makes 2 meteorites. If our commander attacks, it makes 2 meteorites. It's fantastic. Wolfgar of the Icewind Dale is 3 a red and a green for a 4/4 legendary creature human barbarian. It's got melee, in case you don't remember what that is. It says whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked this combat. It also says if a creature you control attacking would cause a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So once again, any attack triggers, they happen twice because of Wolfgar, as well as our commander, especially because we want those meteorites coming down and killing our opponents. These next 3 creatures bring the pain. That's right, we're trying to do damage to our opponent in the form of pain. First up, Apocalypse Hydra. X, red, green for a 0/0 creature Hydra. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. If X is 5 or more, it enters the battlefield with an additional X +1/+1 counters on it. You can also pay 1 and a red to remove a +1/+1 counter from Apocalypse Hydra. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So if we are drawing this in the late game and we have so many mana rocks and so many mana and just absolutely dominating, dump as much mana into this as possible. Swing in with a giant Hydra, essentially. Or you can just take off all the 1/1 counters from this and start pinging your opponent in the face. Hedron Detonator is 2 and a red for a 2/3 creature goblin artificer. Says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Hedron Detonator deals 1 damage to target opponent. Has another ability, could tap it, sacrifice 2 artifacts, exile the top card of your library, you may play that card this turn. So not only are we going to get those triggers from the meteorites coming down and dealing 2 damage to our opponents, but now we can add an additional damage thanks to Hedron Detonator, and also just staple onto it just some card advantage if we needed it. Reckless Fireweaver is 1 and a red for a 1/3 creature human artificer. It says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. Very similar to Hedron Detonator, except we're hitting the whole table every time we make a meteor, or any of the other kind of treasure artifacts or different kind of artifacts we're making. So because our commander has to attack in order to make meteorites again, let's throw in some extra combat steps, shall we? So Karlach, Fury of Avernus, is 4 and a red. For a 5/4 legendary creature, Tiefling Barbarian, it says whenever you attack, if it's the first combat of this turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike till end of turn. After this phase, they're an additional combat phase. Port Razor, 3 and 2 red for a 4/4 creature orc pirate. Whenever Port Razor deals combat damage to a player, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase. Port Razor can attack a player it has already attacked this turn. That doesn't matter. We're going to be swinging in as many times as possible, getting as much damage through as possible, and making a whole bunch of meteorites. That's right, kill them with meteors. So now we have all that awesome mana. What are we going to do with it? Well, let's talk about some big payoffs, in my opinions. This first one, why not throw into every Gruul deck you can? It's a Tali Primal Conqueror. It's 5 and 2 red for a 7/7 legendary creature Elder Dinosaur that's got trample. It also says when it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. It also has a really cool ability on it that you can pay 9 and a green Phyrexian, which means either a green mana or 2 life. Transform a Tali, activate only as a sorcery. Once it's transformed, it turns into a Tali Primal Sickness. It is an 11/11 legendary creature Phyrexian Elder Dinosaur that's got trample and indestructible that says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. Your opponent has to kill this port flips, and when it enters the battlefield, it's really bad too. So those poison counters become a real threat at the table. Orthian, Hero of Lavabrink, is 3 and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier. It has an ability to pay 1 and a red, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. And another ability, if you have all of the awesome mana laying around, is 6 and 3 red. Tap it, create 5 tokens that are copies of another target creature you control. They gain haste. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. Now, if we can actually get the second ability pulled off by paying 9 mana, copy your commander, yes, the legend rule still applies, so all of those copies will immediately die, but they still get the ETB trigger, making 5 meteorites. And that's not saying that we don't have any token doublers on the field, because if we did, let's say we had a 1 token doubler. So now we have 10 meteorites coming on the field, direct 20 damage to somebody's face. They're not going to like that. So let's continue on with these big payoffs. Next one, Goldvein Hydra. X in a green for a 0/0 creature Hydra. It's got vigilance, it's got trample, it's got haste. It says it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And when it dies, you create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. So not only is this really good early game, but this is fantastic late game. Because if we do have all that extra mana lying around, throw it into the X and just immediately hit your opponent in the face with trample. Yeah, that's right. Just go through any creature that tries to block this. Displaced Dinosaurs is 5 and 2 green for a 7/7 creature dinosaur. It says as a historic permanent enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes a 7/7 dinosaur in addition to its other types. What is a historic permanent? Well, it's an artifact, it's a legendary, and it's a saga. So all of our meteorites are now 7/7 dinosaurs as they enter the battlefield. Yes, please. Also, we're throwing in the Hellkite. That's right, 2 of these Hellkite dragons. First up, Hellkite Tyrant. If you guys don't know what this does, it's 4 and 2 red for a 6/5 creature dragon. It's got flying, it's got trample, and it says when it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. So not only is this super mean to hit our opponent with, but alternate win con? Yes, please. Hellkite Igniter also going in here. It's 5 and 2 red for a 5/5 creature dragon. It's got flying. It's got haste. It has an ability we can pay 1 and a red. Hellkite Igniter gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. If we have a ton of meteorites or a ton of treasure or just a ton of both or just artifacts in general, Hellkite Igniter is going to get massive and swing in pretty quickly. I do have one more creature to talk about, and that creature is going to go along with this enchantment, and that's right, we will go right into enchantments after this. But the reason I'm talking about these two together is because it is a combo. That's right. Maybe you guys don't like combos. If not, take it out of the deck. But in this deck, I only put combos in commanders that work well with a combo, and Squee in the food chain combo actually works perfectly with our commander. I'll tell you why. So Squee the Immortal is 1 and 2 red for a 2/1 legendary creature goblin. It says you may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile. That's important. Food Chain is an enchantment that costs 2 and a green that says exile a creature you control, add X mana of any one color, where X is 1 plus the exiled creature's mana value. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells. So you might be going, okay, I don't see the connection if you're not familiar with this combo. Well, we cast Squee. If Squee's on the field and Food Chain's on the field, exile Squee. Add 4 red. Cast from exile Squee for 3. Now you have 1 extra mana. Continue to do that over and over and over and over and over, and you just continue to work up unlimited mana. You can do red, you can do green, you can do red, you can do green. It's basically just do unlimited colors of green and red. And then we can do it with our commander. We can cast our commander, exile commander, cast our commander, exile commander, infinite amount of times. And what does that do? That's infinite amount of meteors. That's infinite damage to your opponent's face. 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, all the way until they get to 0. That's the combo. It's very mean. I'm not throwing any tutors in this deck. My personal deck does have tutors, because if I do get that combo going, it's game over for our opponents very quickly. But like I said, you don't have to put the combo in the deck if you don't like it. It's just another way to make things very difficult for our opponent. Like I said, we're going straight into the enchantment, so here we go. This next enchantment is they care about the tokens. That's right, City of Death. It's 2 and a green for a enchantment saga. Its first lore counter says create a treasure token. Then the 2nd through 6th lore counter, that's right, there's 6 lore counters on this thing. You create a token that's a copy of a target non-saga token you control. We're going to copy our Meteorites, because every time we make a new Meteorite, it's going to do 2 damage, and then taps for mana that doesn't go away. So make Meteorites with City of Death. It's the name of the game. Parallel Lives is 3 and a green for an enchantment that says if an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. Double it up. Make twice the amount of tokens, twice the amount of treasures, twice the amount of Meteorites. Keep it going. These next enchantments are kind of utility pieces that I really like in the deck itself. This first one is Guardian Project. It's a little extra card draw here. 3 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. The fun thing about Guardian Project is that we're playing Commander, and we won't ever have the same creature card name, because that's not allowed in Commander unless you're playing rats or something like that. Rhythm of the Wild is 1 a red and a green for an enchantment. It says creature spells you control can't be countered. That's very important, because we want those triggers to happen all the time. And non-token creatures you control have Riot, which means they enter with a +1/+1 counter or haste. So if you have our commander coming out with Rhythm of the Wild already on the field, probably going to give it haste, swing it immediately, get another Meteorite. Fiery Emancipation is another enchantment going in here. It's 3 red that says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So now guess what? Those Meteorites are hitting for 6. It's gonna get crazy. And the last enchantment here is just a little bit of removal. It's Kenrith's Transformation. That's right, it's 1 and a green for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Kenrith's Transformation enters the battlefield, draw a card. It also says enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. The meanest kind of removal in the game when it comes to just mono green. Yeah, elk their commander. It's not switching zones, so their commander just becomes a 3/3. Sad face. And you draw a card when this enters. Those are all of our enchantments. It's time to move on to the non-permanent variety. That's right, we're going to the sorceries. First up, we're talking ramp. I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. I'm still going with it. We're ramping. First up, Cultivate. 2 and a green. Sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal them. Put 1 in your hand. Put 1 on the battlefield tapped. It's very easy, to the point. You know this one. It's like Kadama's Reach. I'm not putting in Kadama's Reach, so we don't need that much ramp because we are producing so much different kind of mana. But Farseek is also going in here, 1 in green. Sorceries, search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card. Put it on the battlefield, tap, and shuffle. This doesn't say basic, so you can go ahead and grab a duel that has a mountain on it. Nature's Lore, same kind of situation, 1 in a green. Search your library for a forest card. Put that on the battlefield, then shuffle. Once again, doesn't say basic, go grab a duel. Rampant Growth, 1 in a green. Library, basic land. Put it on the battlefield, tap, shuffle. This one does say basic, so go and get the basics. We have enough. These next couple sorceries, they all kind of do different things. Blasphemous Act, we of course need a board wipe in the deck. 8 in a red for a sorcery that says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Well, it deals 13 damage to each creature. So if that doesn't deal it enough damage, then that's a bummer. But this is just our uh-oh button. We just cast Blasphemous Act if we're not doing our job. Jessica's Will is 2 and a red for a sorcery. It says choose 1. If you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both. You can either have add red for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. You guys know what this card does, right? It's fantastic. It gives us the card advantage that we need, if we need it, or we can do both and get as much mana as we needed as well. Another really fun card that I was thrown in here, especially because it got reprinted in this set, is Crackle with Power. It's XXX and 2 red for a sorcery that says it Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. This is a fantastic late game card because not only is our Meteorites slowly ticking away our opponent's life, this is like, alright, and now you're finished with all of that mana that I have from the Meteorites plus whatever mana that we had from treasures or whatever. Throw it into the X cost and deal 5 times that damage to each of your opponent. Win the game. Moving on to the instant department. That is right. First up, we're talking removal. We got Beast Within, 2 and a green. Instant, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Croson Grip is 2 and a green for instant. It's got Split Second, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And Chaos Warp, 2 and a red for an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into the library, then reveals the top card of the library. If it's a permanent, they put it onto the battlefield. These are pretty common in all of EDH. Just quick, easy removal when it comes to Gruul. These next instants, they are some good stuff. I know I mentioned I didn't want to put any tutors in this, so this first one is kind of a tutor. I'll just let you know. Archdruid's Charm is 3 green mana for an instant that says choose 1. You can search your library for a creature or land card, reveal it, put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land. Otherwise, you put it in your hand, then shuffle. Like I said, go ahead and grab Squee if you already had Food Chain on the field, and then you just kind of win the game at that point. Or you could put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Or exile target artifact or enchantment. The 3 abilities here makes this card super flexible. If you don't want to do the tutor route, don't do that first one. But I added this card mainly because not only can it remove creatures, it can remove enchantments and artifacts as well. And I think the flexibility on this card is too good to pass up. Return the Favor is super underrated in my opinion from this new set. It's 2 red mana for an instant with Spree, which means you can add into it to do the Spree costs. So the first one, you can add another one to copy target instant, spell, sorcery, spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So we can go ahead and copy the trigger of making a Meteorite. But the thing I like the most about this card is that second ability, which says you can add another 1. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. That's right. This is a deflecting SWAT at home. It is not going to cost free, which makes deflecting SWAT better. But this is a very cheap option. You go ahead and if anybody tries to remove your commander with single target removal, return the favor, redirect that to their creature. So I love this card. Another new card with Spree is Smuggler's Surprise, 1 green mana. You can add 2 mill 4 cards. You may put up to 2 creature and or land cards from among the milled cards into your hand. And you can also add 4 and a green. You may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. And it has another one where you can add just another 1. Creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Well, Smuggler's Surprise is a fantastic card. It's like, uh-oh, surprise, 6 mana, and here's 2 creatures from my hand that you weren't expecting. It also protects, so It's got that flexibility where you can go ahead and protect all your stuff. Roxanne is a 4 power commander, so this falls in line with protecting your commander. Speaking of protection, Heroic Intervention is 1 and a green for an instant. This is permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible at end of turn. Easy include. Always add Heroic Intervention, anything you got with green. Also added a little bit of card draw that also does what we want to do. It's Big Score and Unexpected Windfall. They have the exact same text. Big Score is 3 in red and Unexpected Windfall is 2 and 2 red. Both instants that say, as an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card. You draw 2 cards and you create 2 treasure tokens. Yes. Card draw, check. Making treasures, check. Count me in. A couple more instants here to wrap things up is actually helping out our game plan. Second Harvest is 2 and 2 green for an instant that says, for each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Did somebody say more Meteorites? Because that's exactly what this card's about to do. This card's nuts in this deck. Comet Storm, very similar to Crackle with Power. X and 2 red for an instant that's got multi-kicker of 1, which means you can cast this spell plus 1 for each time you want. Choose any target, then choose another target for each time this spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. So, opponent's face, and opponent's face. Take a bunch of damage. Moving back onto the permanent section with artifacts, we will start with the Mana Rocks. We're going to go through them really quickly because most people know what Mana Rocks do. Arcane Signet's 2 mana for an artifact that you can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Felwar Stone, also 2, you can tap to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls can produce. A Soul Ring, you can tap to add 2 colorless mana for only 1 mana. Best mana rock in the game. Gruul Signet, 2 mana, pay 1, tap it, add a green and a red to your mana pool. Talisman of Impulse, 2 mana. Tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add a green or a red. It deals 1 damage to you. And of course, Mind Stone, 2 mana. Tap it to add a colorless, pay 1, tap it, sacrifice Mind Stone, draw a card. So, very self-explanatory. Mana Rocks. We want all the mana. Keep it up. I do have one more rock that I want to talk about alone. It's Skyclave Relic. It's 3 mana for an artifact with a kicker of 3. It's got indestructible and says when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create 2 tapped tokens that are copies of Skyclave Relic. You can also tap to add 1 mana of any color. The reason I'm throwing this in here is because they're 1, indestructible, so they're hard to get rid of, and 2, that clause, if it was kicked, makes 2 copies that are tokens of Skyclave Relic. So if Roxanne is on the field, those token copies of Skyclave Relic now tap for 2 mana. Isn't that awesome? I love it. Moving on to some equipment I'm throwing into the deck. First up, the Reaver Cleaver. It's 2 and a red for legendary artifact equipment. It says, equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens with an equip cost of 3. So fantastic little include here. If we can deal damage, we make that many treasures. Now with Roxanne on the field, all those treasures tap for 2. Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves also go into the deck. They're just easy ways to give our commander haste so we can attack right away, so we can take advantage of the attack trigger quickly. Swiftfoot Boots is 2. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, equipped of 1. Lightning Greaves, kind of the same thing. 2 mana, equipped creature has haste and shroud with equipped cost of 0. Don't forget, shroud, you can't target your stuff. So remember that. These next artifacts also help our game plan. We'll start with another equipment. It's Helm of the Host. 4 mana legendary artifact equipment. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of the equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary. If equipped creature is legendary, that token gains haste, equip cost of 5. So similar to Orthian in the beginning, except we can copy our commander Roxanne, and we can keep that Roxanne around because we don't need to get rid of it because of the legendary rule. Amulet of Vigor is very important in this deck because it has 1 mana that says whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped under your control, untap it. So all of our tapped meteors that's coming into the battlefield now are locked and loaded to be able to tap for 2 immediately. Also, if our Goldvein Hydra died with this out, all of the treasures that the Goldvein Hydra made are now untapped. Panharmonicon, very similar to those roaming throne type creatures that we saw earlier. It's 4 generic mana. It says if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. You see the theme there? We want those meteors consistently coming down. Because if we get more than one from our commander, that means the commander tax is going to be a lot less if our commander continues to die. And finally, the land department, the least favorite part to talk about, but it is important as it makes the deck run. Let's talk about these 4 utility pieces first. Inventor's Fair. It's a legendary land that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you just gain 1 life. You can also tap it to add a colorless mana to your mana pool. You can also pay 4, tap it, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So if we have our meteors on the field, then we're just going to go ahead and just continue to gain life. Rogue's Passage is also pretty important here. You can tap it to add a colorless mana. You can also pay 4, tap it, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So if we want to make sure our commander doesn't die with the attack trigger, if people do have good blocks, give it unblockable, make sure it stays alive. Treasure Vault also going into the deck. It is a land that can tap for colorless. You can also pay XX and tap it. Sacrifice Treasure Vault to create X treasure tokens. Just another way to go ahead and make those treasures, and then we can tap them for 2. War Room also going in the deck. It's fantastic. You can tap it to add a colorless mana, or you can pay 3, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. 2. So tap for 3, pay 2 life, draw a card. Card draw is important. Moving on to just cards that just kind of tap for our colors. First up, Command Tower. You know what this one is. You tap it to add a mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Cinderglade is a land, mountain, forest. You can tap it to add a red or green. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basics. Crag Crown Pathway is the pathway that can either come in on the red side or the green side, depending on whatever side you need. Exotic Orchard, not necessarily a land that taps for our colors, but a land that can tap for any color that our opponent can produce. If they are running Gruul colors, then that's a bonus for us. Karplusan Forest is a land that can tap for a colorless, or you can tap it to add a red or green, and it deals 1 damage to you. Rockfall Vale enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. Once again, tap it, red or green. Rootbound Crag enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain or forest. Tap, red or green. Spire Garden enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents for playing commander. Tap, red or green. Wooded Foothills is a fetch in our colors. You can tap it to pay 1 life, sacrifice Wooded Foothills to search your library for a mountain or forest, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And Stomping Ground is the shock in our colors. That is a land, mountain, forest. That enters the battlefield tapped unless you pay 2 life, in which case you can go ahead and have it untapped, and you can tap it for a red and green. And finally, last but not least, our basic lands. We are having 10 forests and 9 mountains. And that is it. That is our whole deck list. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Go ahead and check the description down below. You will find a link to the Mox field of this entire deck list. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. I love this card so much. I had a blast playing with it online. This deck in particular had a really fun time. And those meteorites are amazing. If you guys like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Check the description for all of our social media links. That's TikTok, that's Twitter, that's Instagram, @GuysThatMatch for each one. Follow us along on those to keep up to date with everything else that I've got going on the screen right now. That is right. Those are all of our Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much for your added support. It means the world to us. If you guys wanted to see what they see, which is not here on YouTube, check the description down below as well and consider subscribing to our Patreon. And until the next video, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.